No pressure, Your Majesty. 250 years ago, the United States officially declared its independence from Britain. But now the British monarch is in the US trying to save the relationship. King Charles and Queen Camilla have landed in Washington for a state visit, beginning a diplomatic charm offensive at a really tricky time. Transatlantic ties are strained, to say the least, and US President Donald Trump has recently slammed the King's own Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, for not joining US attacks on Iran. So enter the monarchy's soft power and possibly the King's most diplomatic performance yet. And to help us understand this, Dr. Leslie Vinjamuri, President and CEO of the Chicago Council on Foreign Affairs, formerly from Chatham House in the UK. Welcome to you, Leslie. Talk to us a bit about why Charles is in Washington, or maybe better put, has been made to go there. What does Britain want from this visit and how does Charles fit into that?
Well, I think first of all, the Americans have always, for a very long time, had great admiration and respect for the royal family. It's been arguably more popular here in the United States than even in the UK. The king clearly is seen to rise above politics. This is a deeply political time. It's a polarized time. It's a divided time for the transatlantic partnership, for the US and the UK in particular. And I think the king has, very thoughtfully decided to take this visit. He didn't entirely know, how things would unfold in the days and leading up to his arrival to today. But nonetheless, I think that he believed and believes that he can sort of help the US and the UK rise above the current very, very sour political moment, to highlight the importance of this relationship. He's traveling because it's America's 250th birthday. Should be an extraordinary moment for two countries with a deep and long and extensive and multifaceted relationship. And, were it not for this war and the very divisive presidency that Donald Trump has led over the last year, that might have been the right play. I think it's going to be difficult to pull this one off, but certainly if anybody can do it, it's Britain's king.
What does Donald Trump, on the other hand, want from this? Is it less maybe a diplomatic event for him and more of a spectacle?
Well, President Trump has huge admiration for the royal family. He couldn't have had more respect for Her Majesty the Queen than he did. And those visits were very well documented. They were not easy visits either, but they went remarkably well. He certainly would be, I'm sure he's completely thrilled that the king has traveled to Washington. It makes him, President Trump, look very good. It sort of increases, his visibility, takes him away from politics. He likes the diplomacy of it. He likes the television of it. And he just has so much regard, obviously for the Queen, now for the king, that I think for him it's sort of pure joy. If he can turn that into good television, get his approval ratings above that 38% where they seem to be stuck. I mean, he's not a popular president. Things are not going well for him with the war, with the economy, with any number of dimensions. So this is a regal visit. It's very, very good for President Trump.
Leslie, Donald Trump has publicly insulted Keir Starmer over the war in Iran. How will Charles handle the disrespect shown to his own Prime Minister?
I really think that on this occasion, in public appearances, that the king will rise above it, that he will really try to focus Congress, the president, the American people on the historical significance, the longue durée, really on America's 250th and what this relationship has meant over such a long period of time. I think he will try to avoid any public references to the very difficult politics and rhetoric between President Trump and Keir Starmer. I think that would sort of bring it down to the mundane. And the king is really there as head of state, but even more than any other head of state, he holds a very significant and distinctive role for Americans and certainly for this president.
Now, this visit comes after the White House Correspondents' Dinner on Saturday evening that was interrupted by gunfire. Is the king safe in the United States right now?
Well, I think we all certainly hope so, and that's incredibly important. I would fully expect that the Secret Service, that U.S. security is really geared up for this visit. This is not something that anybody would take lightly. The King of the UK, the American president. I mean, this. Having said that, I think what we saw on Saturday was extraordinary. It certainly raised a lot of significant questions about the security surrounding Trump. Those who are expert on this are very concerned. It's not the first attempt on President Trump's life, as we know. And so it's very bold of the king to make the decision. That clearly was a moment of reconsidering the visit, and to make the decision to carry on, I think is probably the right decision given where we are now. Not without any trip like this is not without some security concerns, but I think overall it should be a very safely executed visit.
Leslie, stay with us. I'm just going to play some opinions of people on the streets of London. We'll hear what they had to say about King Charles's visit to the White House.
I'm not a royalist, but I feel really sorry for the King and Queen having to go. It's put them in a really difficult position.
Charles, he's an environmentalist, and we know what Donald Trump's views are on that, so I think it's going to be really quite tough for King Charles.
Charles should go there and have a nice dinner and have a nice look at the gardens, and then
There were some protesters outside Buckingham Palace on Monday too, speaking out against the King's visit to Washington. The so-called Stop Trump coalition says it's inappropriate for the British monarch to wine and dine with President Trump at the moment. They say Trump's war on Iran has destabilised the Middle East and driven up prices for normal people. Back to you, Leslie. Do these protesters have a point? How appropriate is the timing of this visit?
I mean, look, it's terrible timing, let's be honest. And we just heard from a number of people in the UK. The attitude, the public view within Britain towards America is very negative. Well over 60%, approaching 68% of Brits do not have a strong view of the United States right now. And that has increased significantly just since January, where it was, 50 some odd percent. So it's to go at a time where the American president has started a war, where he didn't consult with the UK, where he's been very tough on America's allies in general, on the UK in particular. I mean, it's hard to overstate how fraught this particular moment is in the relationship. But again, you could argue this is exactly why the king thinks he should go, because he wants to take this relationship out of the current political moment, which is very negative, and to rise above. And there are strong reasons to do that, namely that the U.S. is still so absolutely essential to Britain's security, to Europe's security, to keep the relationship on track. And having decided to go, to then decide not to go would be a very, very politically fraught decision to make.
Some really good points there. Now, an elephant in the room might be the Jeffrey Epstein case. The King's brother, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, was a close associate of the late convicted sex offender. Earlier this year, Andrew was arrested in Britain on suspicion of misconduct in public office related to his former role as a UK trade envoy. Now, these images of Andrew were released earlier this year by the US Justice Department as part of the Epstein files. The former prince has denied any wrongdoing or committing any crimes. Leslie, a lot going on here. US lawmakers want the King's brother to testify over the ongoing Epstein scandal. That hasn't happened yet. The Trump administration still hasn't released all the related files, and Epstein's victims want the King to meet with them, but Buckingham Palace has reportedly declined. Could you help us understand all this?
Look, this is the Epstein, the crimes that he committed against numerous young women are simply unforgivable. There needs to be a reckoning, legal processes, accountability, compensation for the victims. This is going to play for a very, very long time. I think that the King himself is not responsible. He has a very difficult political situation because it's his family. In modern justice, we're not responsible for the crimes of our siblings, but obviously in the public eye, the proximity makes it very difficult. The King has had to manage this in the UK. There's also the question, of course, of Peter Mandelson. I mean, this runs so wide and so deep and is so dreadful. I think the King is to manage his relationship with his brother. He's been doing this. But I think the relationship between our two countries, the United States and the United Kingdom, and the King himself, he needs to focus on this visit, on that relationship. If he decided to really take seriously the question of accountability, and this is in no way, shape, or form to diminish the very real and very immediate significance of the Epstein files that have been released and of the victims. But there are inordinate atrocities and crimes that have been committed against many different groups over this past 250 years. And they need to be dealt with, and especially the question of Epstein and the Epstein victims. But I think for this visit, the King is really focused on trying to keep the US-UK relationship in a place where we can move forward and where the bottom doesn't simply fall out. It is hard to overstate how fraught this moment is and how bold, and some would say, bad, others would say, wise, but one way or the other, it's a very bold decision to take this trip at this point in time.
Let's take a look finally at what the King is going to be doing on Tuesday. First, there'll be a ceremonial welcome for King Charles at the White House. Charles will then sign the guest book and there'll be an exchange of gifts. The two men, so Trump and Charles, will then hold a bilateral meeting. Charles will speak at a joint session of Congress. That'll be followed by a state dinner at the White House hosted by President Trump. Leslie Vinjamuri, that speech to the Congress is going to be a big one, given how you've described it, this moment as a fraught moment. What's riding on this speech?
Oh, I think this, if the King, he clearly will have thought this through. He will be very well received in Congress. Remember that even those members of Congress, even those Republican members of Congress who have followed the president's wishes when it comes to legislation and just generally being supportive, the vast majority of even Republicans are still actually, many of them, transatlanticists, those who focus on foreign policy. They have great value for the United Kingdom, for NATO. There's been a silencing. Many are afraid and simply haven't had the courage for political or other reasons to really assert their interest in those relationships. But I think to have the King come to Congress, he will be tremendously well received by everybody in Congress. Again, this is where the power of the royal family is, again, very difficult to overstate. How that's read by the American public and by the British public is a very different question. And I think here it's actually quite tricky. I think in Britain, people will not be pleased to see their king taking this trip at a time when the American president has condemned their leader, their people, their country, its values, its commitments on multiple dimensions, levied tariffs, played fast and loose with America's security commitment to Europe and to the UK in particular, hasn't really stood up for Ukraine. On all of these values, I think this explains why the approval by the British public of America is so low at the moment. And so I don't think that they'll appreciate seeing their king speak to a Congress who they view, and much of the American public, certainly the Democrats and independent voters, see as having, in a sense, enabled a set of policies and a style of governance that are not dignified and aren't meeting the moment in the way that they would expect. So I don't think this visit will go over as well with the publics as it will with the leadership and the elected officials.
Yeah, that's a really good distinction to make. Could Charles, when he speaks to Congress, mention any of the ideas or the topics that you just ran through, like Iran, like Ukraine, like strained ties, like security? Could we expect anything like that in what he has to say?
I think some, but I think it will be done in a little bit of code. Language that speaks to the troubled relationship and asks all of us to put it in historical context, to think about the significance of NATO standing together in the face of the Soviet threat, of the US and UK and others standing together during World War II. And throughout the past 8 decades in particular, but even longer than that. And so I think he will refer subtly to the current moment, but really not go down into the weeds. It's just simply not what the royal family does. It's not what the king does. It's not what the queen did. I think he'll want to deliver a positive message, a message that encourages everybody to behave better, but by behaving better himself. And I think it will be well received by Congress, but ultimately, let's be honest, and this is the tough, hard news, I guess. Ultimately, it will be disregarded once he's left because America is in a specific moment and has to pull through on its own.
Yeah, that's a really good point you're making. Final question. What needs to happen for this trip to be judged and deemed a success from both sides?
I think it needs to go smoothly. No security issues, good optics, good television, no bad words. People, hopefully no protests. I don't think there will be. And just a sort of receptivity and openness by all parties to speak to the historical significance of the relationship. If it makes people feel better, Congress feel better, if they just get through this visit, that I think it's a low bar. But at this point in time, what is normally a low bar is actually an incredibly high bar and a very important one.
Thanks a lot for that, Leslie. We've been speaking with Leslie Vinjamuri, President and CEO of the Chicago Council on Foreign Affairs. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
So what do you think? Are you following this visit? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you like this video, please hit that like button. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.